Today we have the story of two dinner parties, one hosted in a castle, with tapestries on the walls and linens folded on the table, the silver gleaming, the crystalware set just so, and more forks than really any one person needs at each table, at each setting. It is filled and glittering and gorgeous, perfumed and wonderful. And then there's this dinner party over here, outside, out in the dust, on the dirt, with the plants and the weeds and the grass, filled with people, sort of an impromptu picnic gathered together out where people don't usually dare to go. But this dinner party is filled with all the politicians and all the connected people. All the movers and shakers have gathered and arrived in their beautiful carriages and in their cars. And they are spiffed up and cleaned and laughing, and they are drinking and eating and noticing who's there. The corners of the eyes sort of slide around the room to see who's talking with whom and who's laughing at whose joke and who's avoiding whom and who is here and who is not, and how can all of this be turned to my own benefit, and who shall I make my way over to make sure I get the chance to schmooze with. It is the beautiful, gleaming people gathered here in this room, but over here the clothes are tattered, and they hang desperately dirty from gaunt collarbones. Some of the people couldn't even get to this party on their own. They had to be carried or had to limp their whole way, all the way out. The cheekbones here are gaunt beneath desperate eyes. And as the people who are so desperate have gathered here on the dust and in the dirt, sometimes they can't even stay standing. And they sort of have to sit down and pick at the weeds. And if you watch carefully, some of them will even put them in their mouth and eat the grass so that there's something, they can pretend that there's something in their stomach. Even the dry heaves are better than that gnawing ache of hunger. And in both dinner parties, all eyes are on the hosts. Here in the glittering ballroom, everybody notices the king up on the dais. What is he eating? Who is he talking with? Where is the queen making her way through the crowd? How much is the king drinking? Whose joke is he laughing at, and whose is he turning away from? And out here in this dinner party, all eyes likewise are on the host, on a tired, exhausted, grief-stricken man with eyes that grieve a terrible loss, who sits in the middle and in the midst of his grief turns with astonishing compassion from person to person, offering them something that these people, these desperate and poor people, rarely received. He saw them as people. He saw who they are, and in his compassion turned to them as though they deserved as much attention and care as anybody else. And these desperate people kept their eyes fixed around this host who was there in the midst of this great crowd. Now, as the evening is getting on, there's applause here in the ballroom because the after-dinner entertainment has arrived, and oh, look, the king has provided his great niece to dance for the crowd, and she is a wonderful dancer. Talented, her movements are precise and beautiful. She evokes, and the crowd is so pleased to have her. They start to notice that the king is watching maybe a little more carefully than is comfortable. His eyes are fixed on her a little bit more than they are comfortable with, and his gaze is a little more open and appreciative than maybe is comfortable for the people. They start to move in their seats. They start to get uncomfortable, like they're imposing, and they're feeling like they're voyeurs. But here, at the end of the day, it is hot, and it is dusty, and it has been long, and the people are gathered. And the host's friends come around him and say something to him in a low voice as the people watch with their desperate eyes. Say something to him, and he shakes his head. Again, they lean in and say something with urgent gestures, pointing out to the surrounding areas. And again, he shakes his head. And since the crowd has fallen silent to see what is going on, his voice carries, "No, they don't have to go away. You give them something to eat." The crowd watches as the friends look to each other and bring just a simple knapsack with enough lunch for one or two. This is all we have. More conversation, and then the disciples, looking confused, the friends of the host turn and begin gesturing. "Sit down, sit down, sit down." And now the great niece of the king is standing before the dais. She's panting from her exertion as the king is still staring at her in an uncomfortable way. And in the silence of the ballroom, his voice echoes, "Tell me what you want. Anything you ask, I will give it." And in that shocked silence, she looks to the corner of the room where her mother stands, half in the shadows. There's a subtle nod, a gesture. She raises her chin and says, "Give me the head of John the Baptizer right here on a platter." So the crowd has fallen to the grass in a sort of wave of humanity, all eyes looking to the center, angry now. Is he going to eat in front of them? Now, at this end of the day, when they are weak and tired and hot and worn out, are they really going to eat in front of them? The desperate, angry eyes watch as the host reaches in to the basket and takes out bread. And he lifts it, looks to heaven, prays over it, and breaks it. Again, reaches into the basket to take out the 2 fish, looks up to heaven, prays over it, breaks them, and gives them to the disciples. And then the people in the back of the crowd watch, first in anger, as the disciples begin making their way, then in surprise, as they continue reaching into the basket beyond anything that makes sense, and then in astonishment, as the disciples become closer and continue reaching, and then still in utter surprise and amazement when the disciples come to them, and there is enough. Even for them, there is enough. That when Jesus provides, it is enough. And for one of the first times, perhaps, in their lives, there is enough. And all ate and were filled. And in fact, there's much more left over, broken bits gathered from among the broken people. 12 baskets full, so much abundance. There is enough that there is still more to share. Today is the story of 2 dinner parties, 2 kingdoms. One is beautiful. With every effort that can be made to hide any brokenness, servers that are hovering so there's none of that delay between want and gratification, with silver and crystal and tapestries and everything that money can buy available at a moment's whim. And in this kingdom, with all of that, it is always somebody who has more. There's always somebody in this kind of kingdom. Because that platter, even food is used as a weapon in this kind of kingdom. But there's a second kingdom too, isn't there? And in this kingdom, what can never be bought is given away for free. Jesus, the host, offering for free what money can never buy us and what we can never find in that kingdom, enough. That there is enough for all. That when we bring ourselves and what we have and what we have received and what we've been given to Jesus, it is enough. And that as we give ourselves away, we have enough. And that the more we give, the more we have. In this kingdom. Is at every meal where the host has embraced death to open his kingdom to all.